So welcome everybody. I'm not sure how many people there. I can't really see that on my screen, but I want to thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be speaking with you today about this topic. It's kind of near and dear to my heart. Please, by all means, I always ask questions. They'll be a little getting used to when I usually present. I can see people and see who wants to talk and kind of see how it's going. So please chat because I'm here to help you guys out in any way I can, and to share what I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks on this, my most latest project. So greetings from St. Louis. I'm back in my hometown after doing a national tour of different places. Of course, I have to have the gratuitous shot of my kid being cute. Learned that from some other more professionals at this. And we want to welcome you and let you know that Linwood University is in St. Charles, which is Metro St. Louis. That's where I'm at now. So if you need to get a hold of me, that's where I'm hanging out. So, did I go back? A little delay there. Okay. So how did I get all started in this? So when I was a rookie paramedic a long time ago, back in the 20th century, I was working at a hospital-based service, and I noticed that there were some big differences in how we were treated and other things. So I asked my FTO, who now teaches at our program, I'm happy to say, I asked a question to him one day in between calls as we're cleaning up the truck. It was, why are paramedics not treated on the same level as the registered nurses where we worked? This is me, the rookie. We both have the equivalent level of education, or at least entry level. We're trained primarily in the community college system. We perform patient assessments, the critical thinking, all that good stuff, advanced medical skills. But yet, I noticed that nurses were paid a lot better. They were considered professionals, not technicians. They were considered a higher level of medical professional, which surprised me because we could do a lot more skills than most of them. And this is not anything against nurses. It was just an observation. And in the military career field, a paramedic's always enlisted, but a nurse is always officer, at least if they have the college degree. They're officers. And I just thought, why is there this discrepancy instead of collegiality? And so I asked this question, why are we not considered equals? It confused me as a rookie. And my FTO gave this thing that has stuck with me for my entire career, and it was this. We'll never be on the same playing field until we register. We need the same level of education. And basically, we need a degree. So I'm not here to rehash the degree argument. I mean, that's been going on. Last NEMC conference was a great breakout sessions and all that stuff. But it really sunk into me as to why we were not getting that respect that everyone else was getting. So 15 years later, it kind of percolated in my head. And in 2014, I wrote an article asking whether the paramedic education model failed its students, and that led to a nice presentation in EMS Today. And if you want to see that presentation, I can send it to you, or you can look it up in the archives, the old article and that. But basically, the nuts and bolts was medicine and nursing. I don't know if you can see the cursor or not, but they have a pathway from certificate to associates to bachelors to masters to doctorate. They have this pathway that goes from beginning to end. They can grow in their career. Nursing created their own pathways from an LPN to an RN to a BSN to a nurse practitioner, a anesthetist, and now there's even nurse practice. However, if you go paramedic, you basically have a stop point at the bachelor's degree. Now, there were a few places that had degrees in EMS or related things for paramedics, but overwhelmingly, and even to this day, the vast majority of places do not have a bachelor degree option for paramedics. So what paramedics were forced to do is do this exit decision. They had to decide, well, if I want to advance in my career and not be woke up at 3 in the morning for the rest of my life, what am I going to do? They either had to go all the way back to school to go to med school, or they had to go all the way back to school to get their nursing degree and then move forward. They really didn't get any credit. And I see this today. Paramedics don't get any credit for their paramedic degree or their paramedic training. If they do, it's usually elective credit. And a lot of places, in the admissions, when they do the transfer, they don't know how to transfer that credit. And I was a victim of this, So if I wanted, the fastest way, of course, was to do a whole new profession, whether it be management or emergency management or fire science or safety, security. That's what my master's is in, safety, security, emergency management. But you pretty much have to decide to go backwards, and I was one of those medics that had 218 undergraduate credits before I ever graduated. considering that you need 120 for a degree, but with my paramedic and all the other things and transferring schools and stuff, you know, this is a major issue that's facing our paramedic profession today. So I had a modest proposal, and I'm a big fan of Jonathan Swift, so you're wondering who the guy is, but he had a modest proposal too to make fun of political issues, but mine's more modest than that, which was we can advance the profession by modeling nursing education. Nursing moved up the ranks from fitted sheets and bedpans to DNPs, and making great pay. So let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's do what nursing did. So I gave 5 distinct steps that we could do this. And the one we're really going to talk today is number 3, which is develop the bachelor's degree. So with that said, I was really surprised because I got to present on this and I thought that was going to be the end of it. So what I basically proposed was we're going to eliminate the stop point and create a bachelor's degree that will allow our paramedics to move forward as they grow and change in their desires and career and want to move up the ranks in their profession, and as they get families and need more steady income, more steady hours, things like that. Don't want to work 20 jobs, you know, all at once and everything. So hello, Rob. I'm trying to keep a little eye on the chat here so we're not totally disconnected. So that was my modest proposal. So one thing I learned about this is be careful what you wish for, because 1 year later, my wife's work said, we need to call you back from working at home for the past 7 years in Louisiana. You got to come home and be our senior engineer. So we made the decision to move back home. And I had this great life planned as a stay-at-home dad / consultant. But my wife one day goes, I found the perfect job for you. Here it is. And lo and behold, I became assistant professor and program director, and I had to build a new program from scratch for a bachelor's degree. So be careful what you wish for. So my goatee was not white before I started this, and I was not on blood pressure pills. So just be aware of that if you're pursuing it. And I think it is important. But so that required me to ask the question, what should a bachelor's prepared paramedic look like? What differentiates a bachelor's degree from an associate degree? I've led a lot of debates on different sites and everything, and here to there. And I really had to think about that. So I had to think about that. And Robert, I know Missouri passed some, there's talks about that here in the state I can tell you about later. But anyway, so I thought, well, I knew there were some paramedic program, bachelor programs out there, some degree programs. So I said, let's start there. Let's see what they look like. So I went back and in my previous presentation, NAEMT on their website identified 20 universities and colleges that had a bachelor's program of some sort. And here they are, just for your perusal. This might be outdated. I'm sure there's more now. But here we go. So the first thing I noticed that really, I don't know if concern's the right word, but I found curious was that they had 13 different degree titles. Nursing only has one, BSN in nursing, you know, but for paramedics, we had 13 different degree titles, all variations, emergency medical services, emergency medical care, health sciences. You know, I suspect that has something to do with trying to retrofit a paramedic into some sort of degree of some sort. But what I noticed was 20 different bachelor programs, 13 different names. Only 2 actually had the word paramedic in it. Only 1 actually called it paramedicine, which I think was Central Washington University was the one that actually called it paramedicine. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know, I'm trying to be less controversial. I'm not always good at picking the most politically correct words, so I'm not trying to stir up any controversy today, so please forgive me. I'm an old school road medic, so you have to take that with a grain of salt as we talk, as most of you probably are. So what I noticed, though, in my analysis was that most of these bachelor programs were not bachelor paramedic programs. They were certificate paramedic programs with general education credits wrapped around it and some sort of specialty credits to fill up the remaining time, usually whatever that school is known at. So in the old Lindenwood program was like that. It used nonprofit administration because the guy who got stuck managing it, that was his area of expertise. So a lot of them are fire science, a lot of them are business or education, but most of them were management. Some did the FESHI higher education model, which I'm personally not a fan of, because basically it says you can be an EMS supervisor. That's where fire sees your role, according to FESHI. If you're a paramedic, that's about it. So some schools follow that, where they do paramedic their 3rd year, and then they do the FESHI model their 4th year, when I studied things like that. And many would allow a certificate option. So these bachelor programs would allow students to come in and just take paramedic and get a certificate. So that kind of sealed the deal for me, that this was not a bachelor's paramedic program. This was a certificate medic program that was just wrapping around credits to make 120. As you know, that's the minimum for a degree, a bachelor's degree. And there wasn't any consistency among the others. You know, there wasn't a consistency really in pre-reqs. The only thing that was consistent was the paramedic certificate, you know. So I realized at that point that there was a need to develop bachelor degree programs specifically for paramedics from the ground up. So came back to the question, what should that look like? Thought about that for a lot. Actually, 15 years I thought about that. I'm sure a lot of you guys have thought about it. If that interests you, I'm assuming so. We're all here today talking about it. But so this is what I came up with. I came up with 6 major things. And it's great, because when you're building your own program for your own school, you get to make the decisions. That's kind of cool. That's the plus side, minus side. But anyway, first and foremost, they must be a paramedic first. I thought that was absolutely critical. In nursing, the BSN, they're a nurse first, and then they specialize in their master's programs. So they specialize to be a practitioner, the clinical side, or they specialize to be a nurse manager, or they specialize to be a nurse educator in the master's programs. But the BSN program, they were a nurse first. Likewise, I thought a paramedic should be a paramedic first, and then they can go specialize and move forward. So that means they have to have strong foundational knowledge in the sciences. They have to have increased depth and breadth of paramedicine. There should be a distinct difference when you observe a bachelor's prepared paramedic and a non-bachelor's paramedic as far as knowledge goes. And we always think we're all critical thinkers. You know, we brag that we use common sense, but even to a higher level, we really want them to be critical thinkers. So, and then the second thing I said is this model I've taught from day one is they are a journeyman paramedic. You know, if you look at the nursing model, they're in the hospital with nurses everywhere, doctors everywhere, climate-controlled environment. They usually have a 6-month to a year graduate nurse program. They're supervised. They have mentors. Paramedic, not so much. A few places may have that, but most, you might get 3 ride-alongs and may the force be with you. Good luck. Here's your EMT. So if we have 4 years to mold a paramedic, we really need to have a paramedic that's a journeyman paramedic. Not an apprentice paramedic, not that. And what I mean by that is they're still entry level, but what I mean is they may not know exactly what's going on, but no matter what they get thrown at, they can handle it, stabilize it, and get it to the hospital. That's what I mean by a journeyman paramedic. So they have to have the ability to perform advanced med in the clinic or other medical setting. You know, there's no reason nurses can go to any discipline of medicine. If you look at nursing, they can be an OB nurse, they can be an ER nurse, they can be an ICU nurse, they can be a surgical nurse, they can be a dermatological nurse, they can be a public health clinic nurse. I want to make sure the paramedic degree bachelors can give our paramedics the ability to do that as well. And every time you hear why we can't, they would argue 2 things. 1, we don't have the degree, and 2, you don't have the knowledge and background, blah, 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 that we do. So we're going to fix that in this degree. They have the ability to specialize in any relevant area. I wanted to have a similar model to nursing. So nursing, they are a nurse first, then they can become the administrator, the anesthetist, the practitioner, the educator. I wanted to build that same foundational knowledge for our paramedics to do the same thing. They're prepared and competitive to enter graduate education programs straight from graduation. As you saw in the old model, without the bachelor's degree, we all had to go back and take a ton of extra courses before we could go to nursing school, or we could go to PA school, or we could do our master's degree in MBA, or whatever it was that we were passionate about. I wanted to make sure that whatever you were passionate about, you were ready to go when you graduated with this degree and not have to go back unless you really wanted to. I don't know. I kind of like history and classical humanities. That's why I have more than other folks. And then they are prepared to be the leaders of paramedicine. We really need paramedicine leading us. I'm always amazed when I look at any national document as stakeholders. There are a ton of nurses and a ton of doctors that are in the paramedic stakeholders. You do not see nurses or physician groups have a ton of paramedics in their stakeholder groups. Also, if you will look at Australia and England, they have their own self-governing autonomy bodies. And if we're going to get to that point, we have to have intelligent folks leading the way. So that bachelor's degree needs to prepare those folks to do that in our profession anywhere else, as Christy said. Yes, I agree with you 100%, Christy. Absolutely. So let's see. Let's move on. So now I have to dovetail that with the design of a degree. That's my wish list. And now I have the actual nuts and bolts and rules and regs and everything in a degree. So at a minimum, I said we have to be at least equivalent to a BSN, because that's the minimum, I think, level of respect we deserve and the flexibility like the nurses, Christy. So I said our rigor has to be right there with them. So similar requirements as the registered nurse, the PA, the MD, or the doctor. Now, I didn't mention it in here, but I was going to go into medical philosophy because paramedic means beside the doctor. So nursing has a different philosophy where PA, paramedic, and DO have a more medical background in the philosophy. So we're going to stay on that side of it. But we had to meet all of our state and national requirements. So most of us know about, the DOT education standards, your state EMS board, and COEMS. But once you're at the University of Bachelors, you also have to meet the university requirements by the higher education department for universities in that state, which in Missouri is the Missouri Department of Higher Education, and regional university accreditation. So I have 2 accreditations. I have COEMS, well 3 if you count the state. I have state, COEMS, and now I have HLC requirements I have to meet as far as degrees and all that other good stuff. Another thing that was really important is that we had to delineate the line between an associate, bachelor's, post-baccalaureate, and graduate. So I really looked at nursing, and this comes up a lot because there's a lot of the young folks, people who were me 20 years ago, that really say their bachelor's program should have critical care in it. Well, if you look at the national education standards, the answer is no. It's not in there. If you look at what nurses do, nurses don't do that in their bachelor's level. They'll get a post-baccalaureate sort of CEN certification, or they'll do some specialty maybe as a master's. So we had to really follow those similar models of medicine because the other disciplines of medicine need to understand what we're doing. I need to have a degree plan that's similar to what they're doing because that's what they understand, because at the end of the day, people are people. People are people when we're treating them. So the prereqs and a lot of this other stuff should be the same. Medicine is medicine. So when we look at that, we must be prepared, again, the graduate education. It must be flexible to meet the student's needs and goals. If I want to be the chief of the department, do I really need organic chemistry to go to PA school or med school? It's a good question. Must transition too. We have a lot of paramedics that don't have a degree, but will want a degree to move forward. And we have to decide how they're going to be grandfathered into this while still maintaining that rigor. We have to have that leadership education. Part of the bachelor's degree is the liberal art education, liberal arts concept that most 4-year degrees follow. Lindenwood University is no exception. And for me, this was important. It had to be as close to 120 hours as possible. There are programs in Metro St. Louis that have a 80 to 90 credit hour associate degree program. One has a 91 credit associate degree paramedic program. Might as well just come to us and get 120, because if you do theirs and come to us, it'll be more like 150. So I wanted to really make sure that it was 8 semesters, just like nursing is. And I wanted to really, or any other biology, chemistry, pre-med degree. And I wanted to make sure that no summer semesters requirement. This actually came from the president because of financial aid issues. In other words, I still want to have students have a traditional university experience. If they want to take off for the summer to earn money to pay for school, or if they want to do, study abroad or something, they have the ability to do so. We want them to get the full university experience. I had a great time in my university experience, probably too much fun, but we want those same opportunities. We don't want this to be hardcore 136 or 140 credit hour bachelor degree, which it could easily become if I made it solely pre-med focused, or if I made it solely, academic focused. You know, they always want you to add education, but they never say what they're going to take out. You know, so that was a big decision I had to think about when developing this. And the two most important things, we were going to put the medicine back in paramedicine. All those degrees, I didn't see any of those degrees that hammered the medicine. If we're a paramedic, and if 90% of what fire-based EMS does is EMS calls and medical calls, we need to put the medicine back in it. And the other thing that was really important to me is paramedicine has to be more than EMS if we're going to survive and evolve in this profession. We have to be able to do more than just run an ambulance 911. We have to be able to do other things. We have to be able to expand and have opportunities for our profession so we don't leave it. I talk about that more in my previous document there, presentation. You can look that up if you want. So let's go back to the original goals. They must have a strong foundational knowledge in relevant sciences. So what I did was research the other education knowledge. And really the big three I need to look at, the one we're closest to is the BSN. So what do they require for their prerequisite courses and their science courses? And then a lot of our paramedics want to become PAs, so I want to look at that model. And then some guys want to go to med school, and we fall beside the doctors, so it's important to know what doctors have. So I wanted to look at these three particularly for what their science prereqs were to see how applicable are they for us, if that makes sense. So here's the majority of the science courses listed. I hope you all can see it pretty well. But what I did was I just made a little graph here, and I put all the courses down, and then I put whether they take them. So, you know, the RNs, the PAs, MDs, of course, had to have 2 semesters of composition so they can write. Math was interesting. The nurses required statistics and algebra, as well as the PAs. But the medical doctors required calculus. So depending on how you tested your freshman year, you may have to take some algebra first before you go to calc or something like that, or vice versa. You may have to do remedial math before you can go to algebra. The nurses chose a survey biology and a survey chemistry, where PA schools and medical schools chose the entire sequence. So definitely more biology and science for the medical model than the nursing model. However, the nursing and PAs required AMP1 and AMP2, the full AMP sequence. Medical school did not. Medical school, though, did require organic chemistry, which PA school requires, either 1 semester with biochemistry or 2 semesters of OChem. Medical school didn't require biochem either, and the reason for that is med school does gross anatomy and biochemistry the first year of medical school. So they say it's recommended, but it's not required. And then there were some other courses. So the PA schools require, and nursing schools both require psychology, human development, medical terminology. Some may or may not recommend public health. I left that for there. And the medical schools, more and more are requiring EMT. And if you don't have it in your degree, you're required to get it the summer before you start class. I know Washington University here in St. Louis requires them to go through an EMT class. So if we look at the certificate paramedic, the only courses that are required to enter the program are a survey AMP course, which comes from COEMS, which can be concurrent or a prereq. It's definitely much more helpful as a prereq than a concurrent. And though a lot of people do it as a concurrent, and an EMT course. If you do the associate degree program, they add a little more. You get the English, you get a general math, not usually a college algebra, some might, but most just a general math, and then a general biology, and you usually don't get a general chemistry. If you notice the little stars on there, those are things that are in the National Education Standard, which we'll talk about a little further. These are courses where National Education Standards say we need to teach them, but not a course, just topics in a course. Whereas in the PA or nursing, like particularly psychology, human development, and med term, those people require entire courses in that subject as part of their bachelor's preparation. So this, I wanted to put this on here so you can look, so you can kind of see what the other folks are doing. So then we had to go through and say, which one of these are good for us? So what I decided on was, of course, Comp 1 and 2. For math, I actually did something different. I chose statistics and not college algebra. And the reason for that is the National Education Standards say you must understand evidence-based research. The only way you can do that is with statistics. And also, I thought, how much algebra do I really need to be a paramedic? And really, I just need enough algebra or 6th grade algebra to do dimensional analysis med math. So I don't really need all the college algebra, sine, cosine, parabolas, all that stuff to do med math. So I wanted to keep it straightforward. So we require statistics in our program. We decided on the survey bio and the survey chemistry as required for a couple reasons. One, it didn't make sense to have, if nurses can be nurse practitioners and doctor nurse practice with only a survey biology and a survey chemistry, it didn't make sense to penalize our guys and make them take additional science unless they were going to a pre-med route. Second of all, I really thought, what would the advantage, would organic chemistry really help the paramedic? With the exception of understanding what racemic means and racemic epi, probably not, because I've taken organic chemistry. I've taken all these prereqs. My undergrad's actually in what I call Biochem Light, Health and Wellness, which was Biochem without Calc 2. But I had enough for a Biochem degree. I just didn't like the lab. But I've taken all these courses pretty much. The A&P, though, we wanted them to have a very strong A&P knowledge, A&P 1 and A&P 2. So we definitely wanted to do that. And the biology and chemistry, what do I need the chemistry for? So what I need the chemistry is enough to understand pharmacology, and I need enough to understand how to do dimensional analysis. So again, a survey chemistry accomplishes those goals. A survey biology, I need enough just to meet the prereq and understand enough of a cell to go to anatomy and physiology. And the survey biology accomplishes that goal for us. But we did make them do the full A&P sequence. We started with the survey, but we realized soon enough they need the full 2-course sequence, which also helps if they want to go to PA school. They already got it under their belt. So then we looked at the other courses. So we added psychology, because in our school, psychology is a prereq to human development, which is a national education standard. So we make them take the whole course about psychology and human development. And psychology is definitely something you might use on a call, right? We never see any people with psych issues, right? So that's kind of important. Medical terminology, we have the whole course. Public health, we made a course. Pretty much anywhere where there was an asterisk, we made a course. And pretty much our university already had all those courses, but we had, ironically though, our biology department didn't do human patho. So we had to create our own patho course. And then emergency medical technician, we did, I'll get to that in a minute, we did something different with that to get us some extra time on the backside. So let's look at GE. Of course, now, in order to get 120 hours, I have to fit as many of these prereqs into my GEs. And I was very lucky because Lindenwood had just revamped their GEs to be more competitive and to pretty much follow the 42-hour model that almost all the universities in the state of Missouri were using. So this is our GE requirements for that well-rounded liberal education. Here, you can see we have our core science and that. And I'm not going to spend too much time here, but I'm going to show you how nicely they fit in. So we can easily put our Comp 1 and Comp 2. Our statistics counts as our math. Students can pick any history they want. It's a state requirement to do a U.S. history course in Missouri. Our psychology, biology, chemistry, and A&P 1 knocked out all our science prereqs. They can take any art or literature course they want. We recommend a foreign language because they'll use it as a paramedic, and it also meets the human diversity requirement, so they don't have to take 2 extra classes. But if some places require them to do an ethics course, we can say you can substitute that ethics for 2. Foundations of Public Health meets a GE elective, so that was very lucky for us. And then for those who are thinking about pre-nursing or whatever, or if they need to fit in some extra hours, we can put in nutrition as an optional course. We didn't make that mandatory because as paramedics, we really don't feed people. But sometimes PA programs or nursing programs want that, so we encourage, if you're thinking that route, take that course in your first 2 years and knock it out. And then our human diversities are incorporated into the 4 human culture selections. So with the exception of 3 courses, I can pretty much put most of my prereqs covered in my GEs. So I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And that's really nice too, because if this paramedic's not for everyone. So if they decide to change major, they're not wasting time. They're getting GE credit for these courses. They're not having to go back and take some oddball GE course. It meets, and this is a university-wide GE requirement. So, but that left 22 hours of additional stuff that we had to make sure they had before they started our cohort. So that's A&P 2, human patho, which we do completely online, and Professor Gustafson does a great job with that. Medical terminology, also available completely online. Human development, online on campus. And then what we did was we broke up our EMT course into 4 courses. So our EMT course is Foundations of Paramedicine, Paramedic Operations, EMT with a lab, and EMT Clinical. And what this lets us do is when I studied the national education standards, I realized that the same, the EMT level of foundations and ops was virtually identical to the paramedic level with minor exceptions. So by breaking these courses, I don't have to reteach foundations and ops in my paramedic program like the vast majority of other paramedic programs do. More importantly, it gets me operations in the front end before they ever take a clinical class. And we added some really cool things like non-crisis intervention and DT for EMS. So these students have some awareness of how dangerous the profession is before they ever do a clinical course. That to me was very important, that our students are safe. So this rounds out to about 22 hours, along with our 42 pre-req courses, gives us 64 hours, which is basically 4 16-credit hour semesters. Very doable. It's not like you're doing 18 or 20 hours to keep on a 4-year track. You know, so this is very doable to a student. So 1.1's knocked out, but we have the rest of the 6. So the first half of the things focus on paramedic education. They are a paramedic first. They are a journeyman paramedic. They have the capability to perform advanced medicine in the clinic or other medical setting. So how are we going to do this at a bachelor's level? Well, as you know, paramedic education is driven by the National Education Standard. So I wanted to show here the difference between the bachelor and the associate or certificate model. So on the left, I have every single National Education Standard. If you go to that document on ems.gov, these are what we have to teach. On the left, to show the certificate associate degree model, I chose South Louisiana Community College because I used to work there with Acadian, but also Louisiana is one of those states where the entire community college system agreed on the same courses and the same number of credit hours for every school in the state of Missouri or Louisiana for transferability. So this is not just one school, this is an entire state. So it gives us a good background. And Minnesota, Wisconsin, I think have similar setup and some other things. So thank you, Harry Murphy, my former office mate, for sending that to me so I could throw that in here. But I want you to look at the difference. So here are the titles that the state of Louisiana uses, and it's right at 37 college credits, whereas ACE credits will give you up to 39. So most paramedic programs between 37 and 39 credits for the paramedic program. So some people do more. I know of a technical college that does a 3-year degree. In fact, in St. Louis, we have 91 credit hour degree programs, but I wanted to look at the core paramedic courses. In Louisiana, it's 37 credits. If you add EMT, it's 47 credits. But you get the idea. So the first thing we looked at, the huge thing you can look at is at the preparatory courses. So if you look at the state of Louisiana, their 1 3-credit hour course, Introduction to Advanced Care, like most programs in the country, covers all the preparatory requirements of the National Education Standard up through, it addresses the medical terminology, patho, lifespan development, public health, pharmacology, airway, all the way up to there. Whereas we have, each one of those is 1 or 2 courses for us. So we're doing Foundations of EMS as part of our EMT course as a prereq, and everywhere where you see an asterisk is a prerequisite course, not a cohort course. So even though it's in the NES, it's really a prereq to us before we put them in the cohort. And we do medical documentation as a class. Medical documentation is the only skill they're going to run on every call and where a lot of problems happen. So we actually use MetaView from Jonathan Fite. We use his program, so students are starting to write EPCRs, and they write those all the way down to their clinicals. So we're getting them used to how to document from day one. The certificate program uses a 5-credit hour, which is better than most. Some are 3 or 2 even. A&P for paramedics, specific course form. We do the 8-credit hour A&P sequence completely through. I also put our prefixes here just to highlight the advantages of being at a university does. I don't have to teach A&P because I got PhDs in anatomy and physiology at the university. I don't have to teach psychology. I got a PhDs in a psychology department. I got a public health department that can teach those courses way better than me. So I want to utilize those experts and not be in a silo of only paramedics teaching everything. That's part of that liberal education and being a stronger, getting as much experts as I can into those courses and to bring a diverse perspective. So if we look at these things, prereq courses, so we get finally down to airway management. They do a 4-credit hour class where they merge that with assessment. We have 2 separate classes. They do 4 credits, we do 5. Medicine, medical emergencies 1 is cardio and respiratory, and the rest is in medical emergency 2, which is only 2 credit hours. As you see, we do 10 credit hours there. We're adding depth and breadth to every paramedic course. Trauma is only 2, we do 4. Special pops is only 2, we do 4. And if you look at the clinical EMS ops, we do that already in the front before they come in the cohort. Most places put it at the end again as, oh, we better add that because it's on the registry test. We don't stop, forget it. They've already had it before they entered the cohort for us. And then I want to notice the credit hour wise, the community college hour seems to have more hours than us. We have 11, they have 13 or 14. But when you do the contact hours, they're using a 1 to 37.5 hour for their clinicals, and we're using a 1 to 60 hour for our clinical and lab. And the federal government can give you 30 to 60 credit hours. We use the 60 versus 37, and that's so we can keep at 120 hours versus 140 hours. Also saves the students some money in that regards, which may or may not be a good thing if you're cash strapped or whatever. You have to make those decisions yourself. But for those who notice that the certificate did more clinical hours, I want to make sure you knew that we actually do more. The state Louisiana programs, a minimum 480, we do 660. And most states are around 500 and 600. The state Missouri requirement is 500. 250 hospital, 250 field. That's the Missouri requirement. So if you look at the difference in depth and breadth by the credit hours, the difference is the associate and certificate model does 37 credit hours. We do 68 credit hours. And if we translate every class to the contact hours, it would even be more drastic because our labs are at 1 to 60, not 1 to 37. So what do we do with all that additional time? So let's go back to our goals. They are a paramedic first. So first of all, we have increased depth and breadth. We expanded the NES topic areas into entire courses. We do critical thinking. So half of every didactic class is simulation. Our students starting in cardiology will do 8 full 30-minute simulations every week with debrief, putting them on a stretcher, moving into a mock ER, giving patient reports, the whole shebang. So we are building experiences into them before they ever go to clinicals. There's very few programs. I know the pararescue probably is one of them where I got the idea from, and other places that are at that level, but I counted them. We're about 120 fully immersive simulations where Cohen's requirement is 10. That's what the new Appendix G, which I'll be talking about next month because that was a nightmare. It took me 2 years to figure that out. Actually, it was a whole team effort on that one. And we are looking into that. And then also, we make these kids do research papers in APA format starting in foundations. We get them used to be thinkers. We teach them how to research. We have our librarians come in and teach them about research methods. We have a whole site on there just for paramedic journals and everything, so they're getting used to this. Because in graduate school, as you know, it's write a paper every week. That's pretty much all I did in my graduate program. So, and my wife admonished me for being a big procrastinator, and I stressed her out way too much. I'm sorry, sweetie, because I would only write my paper at 7 p.m. on Sunday and it was due at 10 and all that stuff. But we survived. And we make sure that our questions are higher level scenario-based exam questions. Almost all of our multiple choice questions are Bloom 4 through Bloom 6. I mean, quizzes and smaller exams are, of course, 1 through 4, just because we have to make sure they have that base knowledge. But pretty much starting with comprehensive exams, final exams, and our comprehensive final, they're all Bloom 4 through Bloom 6. So we're getting them ready from day one to handle more advanced stuff on a serious level. So the journeyman paramedic, again, the simulations are core to that. We are hearing time and time again where preceptors come to us and say our students run circles around other paramedic students they see. And I think that's 100% the lab and simulations, because even though they're bachelor degree students, it doesn't mean that they're magically smarter than other paramedic students. They're not. And they're intrinsically kinesthetic learners, hands-on. So I make sure half a didactic is hands-on on purpose, because they're a muscle memory. And we all know as paramedics, to be a journeyman paramedic, we have to have that muscle memory down. It's not uncommon for students to say they're bored to death because they've already done IVs for 7 days and here we're sticking the arm again on day 8. But we're building those muscle memory skills. And that's why we dedicate so much time to skills and simulation lab. And then we've expanded the hours. So the minimum is 500 for the state of Missouri. We do 660. Some places do more than us, but our clinicals are divided over 4 semesters and really focused and targeted to follow the didactic courses to get the most experience. And we're also really blessed that we're in St. Louis. St. Louis, I call it medical Mecca. because it's the only big city I know that has 3 level 1 trauma centers, 2 level 1 pediatric trauma centers, 3 medical schools, and like 5 level 2 trauma centers within a 30-mile radius of the Gateway Arch. So we're really blessed with numerous opportunities with WashU, with SLU, with SSM, BJC. So our students are getting a really good experience in clinicals here versus probably other places in the country that are struggling. We're very lucky that we can get in the ORs and get tubes. That's always been a challenge for a while now. So, but we still have to do more and target it. And we probably spend more hours in the hospital than we do in the field, just because that's where the patients are. We're really more focused on competencies and encounters versus hours. And hopefully, as everyone's been working towards the eventual goal, hopefully is we don't have minimum hours, we have competency-based education. And then we can successfully examine, assess, and treat critically ill injured patients. Of course, the extended A&P and patho doesn't hurt. Our physical exam class is a 3 credit hour. We use the Jarvis text. We teach it to the BSN level, full head to toe assessment, way beyond just the regular class. We do the same thing with our pathophys as a nursing textbook, and our pharmacology is expanded to 5 credits from 1 or 2 because we want to get the whole body systems. I'll talk about that in a little bit here. So we have expanded knowledge. Our 12-week class teaches way beyond STEMI. We get into axis deviation, hemiblocks, electrolyte imbalances, VT versus SVT, hypertrophy, atrial, ventricular, LGL, WPW, and a lot of the other stuff. Pretty much to an ER doc level from what our ER doc tells me and my students who went to medical school tell me. Because all my medical students ask me for the study guides I made them, and they use that to teach the doctor, their classmates how to do that. In fact, I just got a request yesterday for one for PA school. So we teach it really at a high level. Same with internal medicine. Professor DiMartino is a nurse practitioner as well. So he is really teaching that integrated comprehensive knowledge that they're not going to get in a regular class. The expanded size. And of course, like any other good course, we put our merit badges in there. I think all paramedics should have the Boy Scout sash with all our merit badge pins. We make sure they get ACLS, PHTLS, PALS, AMLS, CPR, NCI, hazmat awareness, NIMS 100, 200, 700, 800. All those are required in the specific courses, like most paramedic programs do. So we're still doing all the stuff the CERT programs are doing. We're not teaching, just an academic model. In fact, I have some debates sometimes, I get told we're an academic model. I'm like, no, we're an academic model and we are a skills model, a skills profession. Our guys are expected to know the skills. When no one else can get it, they call us to do it. So we do not lose sight of the fact that skills and simulation are critical. It's half of our program. We've never lost sense of our roots. Sure. I'll have an email at the end, Cheryl. Just email me and tell me what you want and I'll send it to you. I have some must memorize things and some different little things that they ask me for. Happy to do that. So I think we're getting closer to the end. I'm trying to get this wrapped up in the hour for questions. Capable of to perform advanced medicine in the clinical or the medical setting. Community paramedicine is this big deal. The doctors of old used to make house calls, then the PAs made the house calls, and now we're making the house calls. And then the PAs got more education, and now they're too valuable, and so now they're realizing we can do it. But we have to do that. So our physical examination class, like I said, is extended. We use the Jarvis text head to toe to teach that. Our pharmacology, we use the Len nursing. I'm teaching that right now. Do every body system and the routine drugs, as well as focusing. We also get an advanced pharm for critical care because we talk about the Singh-Vaughan-Williams classifications in detail. We talk more about mechanisms of actions by groups. We talk about hypertensive meds by class. We get more in those details of those meds that they're prescribed, as well as critical care medicines, as well as primary care medicines. Let's see, I don't want to reread my slides from verbatim, but we tailor the clinical experiences to get a more broad medical perspective. And the fact that they have more A&P and more patho and more knowledge just allows for a smoother transition to PA or medical school. There's just no way around it. It just helps. So now I have the last 3 things that I thought about. We have to be able to specialize, they have to be competitive, and they're prepared to be the future leaders. So what I did was look at, again, to the nursing model. The nursing model, you are a nurse first, then you specialize. Well, I thought, I have 12 to 15 credits left in this 120. Let's instead of just having them do random electives, let's have them do an emphasis area and get a head start on that specialization. So what we did was we wanted to make a more competitive candidate for grad school or PA school and prepare the student for grad. So we created pre-made emphasis areas in fire science. So a lot of our guys here in St. Louis work for a fire district. You have to have St. Louis County or St. Charles County Fire 1 and 2. So we have relationships with both fire academies. And if they complete those courses, they get a fire science emphasis and they get 15 college credit hours, which makes sense. If we're doing, 90 to 80% medicine and 15% fire, the ratio degree, that kind of works out the same way. So we're not acknowledging that fire isn't important and fire science is important. We've built an emphasis just so those kids can go to the academy. And we have kids that go to either one. They decide which one's best for them and they go to it. We have healthcare administration. If they want to be a chief or a supervisor, we give them 4 basic core classes in leadership, ethics, management, and something slipped my mind. Management, ethics, leadership, and supervision. There's something, I have it written down. Paramedic education. Our first course, and that's paramedic EMS instructor. In fact, if you've taken an EMS, an MC1 instructor course, we will give you experiential credit for 3 college credits for that course because they're pretty much the same course. We offer that online just like NEMC does. So if you're thinking about doing a major with us, you'll get that as well. But we also added a course on how to develop curriculum, a course on how to teach a lab, and then we do a student teaching practicum for the last course where the students actually get to practice teaching here with us in the classroom. Or if they're taking the class remotely, they can sign a contract with a local paramedic agency that's teaching education and so. Public health is one, criminal justice. Then we have independent study. If someone has a specific grad school, like I have a student that did all the prereqs for an MBA program. I had another student that didn't want to do the pre-med minor because he didn't want to do calc and physics. He wanted to go to PA school. So he just put the specific PA prereqs he wanted there. And then minors. So the difference between an emphasis area and a minor, if you don't know this, is an emphasis area can be completed within 120 hours and a minor takes over 120 hours. So we have a pre-med minor. So if our kids who want to go to pre-med can do this. I have about 5 kids in that right now. So they basically either decide to work summers or take a 5th year, and they get through their OChem, they get their biology, they get their micro, they get all that good stuff. We have a pre-nursing minor because a lot of our students, we don't have a nursing program here. So a lot of students do 4 years as an athlete. They'll take a major like public health or something like us, and they'll get a minor in pre-nursing to go to like the BS to BSN 1-year programs. If you take our program, you only need 2 additional courses to get your pre-nursing minor, nutrition and micro. I really wanted micro in our prereqs, but there was just, with the prereqs and the way the biology department set everything up, I just couldn't fit it in there without disrupting the 8-semester sequence. So it's an option. And then any other minors. I have a kid that wants to go to law schools and loves history. She did a minor in history. I have another one that wants to do a minor in Spanish because he wants to do missionary work in a third world country. More power to you. Plus, you'll definitely use that in the U.S. anyway. And someone wants to do minor in psychology. Well, yeah, you will definitely use psychology in our profession. So to go here, these emphasis areas allow us to specialize these, give them a head start. They give them the leadership knowledge. They address all these issues that we're talking about to be a leader. So the fact that our students are already going to be a better paramedic and have the emphasis area to specialize, get a head start, is going to do that. And also for all my students who have to get Fire 1 and 2, this allows them to be hired right out of college. They have Fire 1 and 2, IFSAT credentialed. And if someone has an IFSAT credentialed Fire 1 and 2 from somewhere else, we accept it. So here's the totals. Gen Ed's 42, additional prereqs 22, cohort major courses 45, and the minor is 12 minimum, which gives me right at 121. I was 1 credit off my goal. I'll live with that. And I can do it in 8 semesters. To Earl, who's talking about needs to be a foundational component, there's just not enough hours in the day to do that. So what we're actually looking at doing is we're building a new emphasis area called the advanced clinical practitioner, which will be critical care paramedic, community paramedic, and primary care paramedic. And that'll be all rolled into there. And then our patho, our physical exam, and our pharm courses are prereqs as part of that emphasis, part of that certificate emphasis area. So, but if you look at the hours of 120, there's just no way to do it. And nursing doesn't do it, and medicine doesn't do it. They all do that later, specialty courses. It's just a matter of, again, I can add stuff, but what am I taking out? And to be honest, critical care is 80% review of patho. And especially with our course, it's like 85% review. The only thing we're not teaching critical care for our bachelor degree is IV pumps and vents and a couple advanced little toys like Minnesota tubes or advanced chest tubes. I mean, really, most of critical care paramedicine is just bringing in the advanced patho if you look at the curriculum. So that's a great component you mentioned there. I hope I answered that question, Earl. And finally, there's more. Hold on. So everything I've told you about before is a traditional 18-year-old to 20-year-old student who has no previous knowledge and is not a paramedic certified. What are we going to do about all the guys who have a paramedic license? How do we get them bachelor degreed so that they're not overtaken by the young whippersnappers of the future? Well, I thought about that very carefully. So I had some goals for that too. So first of all, the rigor has to be equivalent. We have to recognize their credit and their training and their experience as much as we can. Most schools don't do that. It's lucky they'll get it listed as just general college credits, but it doesn't apply to anywhere in the degree track. And you've got to be able to complete it while working full time. So we realized we have to have a special track for these guys. They're going to have so we created an experiential medic track just for them. So experiential credit, we'll give you up to 12 for your EMT, 39 for your paramedic, and 15 for fire 1 and 2. Those are per ACE recommendations, pretty strong. We get military training. I used to train IDMTs and PJs. So the CCAF, Air Force has an advantage over the other branches. They have their own accredited community college. So for my IDMTs, I can give them pathophys, physical exam and assessment, and leadership training from their NCO school. Whereas the other things I'm going to have to go through one at a time and look at ACE recommendations. So the Air Force has a leg up on that. I have 2 IDMTs enrolled in my bachelor's program now. One's in Florida, and I think one's in Hawaii, taking this remotely. And like any other institution, we could take up to 90 total credit hours transfer. 40% of the major has to be at LU, just like any other program. Minimum of 30 college credits complete at the school for the degree. That's pretty much standard for any university you're going to see. So very, very friendly. And of course, because these guys work 24 and 48-hour shifts, they're going to have to be 100% online delivery. These guys are not going to be able to stop and come in and take, biology with lab. So they're asynchronous. All our courses, they have to be asynchronous online, so these guys can do it at work or do it on their day off. I have a guy that's working in an oil refinery, doesn't have many calls. He just does his degree at work. Very lucky. I'm kind of jealous. I didn't get that option. I had to, do it on the weekend, and my wife yelled at me for being a bad student. But at the same time, you can take these courses on campus. That's becoming less of a big deal. But when I did my master's 10 years ago, that was important to me that EKU had a brick and mortar option, because back then online degrees, you had to be careful. I made sure I picked a state institution for that reason. Less of a stigma now, but still, I had a student who was a lab assistant, would teach the labs on Monday, and the next day he would be a student with them taking physical exam, and the next day he'd be their preceptor again. So we had the option for them to do either or. On the curriculum side, it looks like I got about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna wrap this up. The big difference is we don't require labs for the prerequisite courses. Their experience as a paramedic and their years of dealing with anatomy and physiology as a paramedic is adequate for us. So we'll take survey courses online. Now, if they have the course and transfers in, we'll take it. If they want to take it, like some of our guys want to go to PA school, and so they come in brick and mortar, they trade shifts and do it, and that's fine. But we have it set up, and the way we can do it 100% online is we don't require labs for the survey bio, the survey chemistry, A&P. It also acknowledges that most of these paramedics took a survey course with or without a lab. So we honor that A&P. They're basically grandfathered on that level. We do make them take some additional courses that we teach to a higher level. Again, equivalent rigor. So they have to take our 5 credit hour or our 4 credit hour farm. It's not 5 because they don't need to do the lab with the IVs. They already know how to do that. The medical documentation, most of them don't have. Physical exam, we do to advanced level. And then we built a 3 credit hour capstone. In fact, I was very lucky. I asked Bill Leggio, who's on the NIMSI board, hey, you want to teach for me and build me a capstone for experienced medics? And he was like, sure. And so we were just awesome. We got this great, awesome class, taught very well. Thank you, Dr. Leggio, for that. And just designed just for the experienced medic. And then they still have to do an emphasis area or minor. And a lot of them have their fire 1 and 2, and they just use that. Some want to go to PA school, they choose that. I have one guy who's going into wants to go get a master's in health administration. So he did the leadership track and can do that. So we take more college credits for paramedic than anyone. And I don't know any school that can have them graduate faster than us because we actually use their paramedic credits in their degree. So in wrap up, I think I was able to accomplish all our goals. The journeyman paramedic concept, work in any environment, specialize, be competitive, and a smooth transition for the licensed paramedics to work, to get their degree without having to quit their job, and they can do it while they're working full time in these crazy shifts. So I hope that other people see the value in this, and I hope that this model grows, and if there's something better, I'll always change if we can figure out something better. But that's pretty much wrapping up. So here is my contact information if you get a hold of me. I tried to change the green to white, but it wouldn't let me for some reason. But I have my work email and my personal email here, and you can call me in my office. It always transfers to my cell, so I'll say hello. But leave a message because I get a lot of phone calls. Excuse me, I get a lot of oddball phone calls, as you guys all know. But if I get a message, I'll usually call you back real quick. So again, thank you for the honor of presenting this to you. I'm really honored that you would have me here. And I hope this helped you understand a bachelor's degree model and what it can be for students. We're already seeing great success stories with our students and how it's opened doors for them. And I'm ready to answer any questions you got.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That was really fantastic. We do have some awesome questions that have come in so far. So we'll start with the first one that came in. What do you think of the idea of conducting a doctoral fellowship in EMS?
Absolutely. I don't see why not. If nurses can be practitioners, so can we. We're designed more to function independently, critical think, and follow independent orders. I think there's no reason why we can't paramedic practitioners. One of our faculty members is a state rep, and last year he put it as a bill just to see where it would go, and it caused quite a stir here in the state of Missouri. And a lot was learned from that. A lot of surveys taken that really opened eyes. And a lot was learned from that. I can only have time to talk about what was learned from that, but if you want to, we can call and chat about it separately. But yes, absolutely. I don't see why we can't do anything that nurses can't do. That's my goal with this degree, is give us the same flexibilities and opportunities as nursing has.
Awesome. And then the next question is, what was the reaction of the nursing program or of nursing program leaders in the area when they found out that you were going to be offering a paramedic degree program at the same university or in the same area as where they're offering theirs?
It was very positive. In fact, at Maryville University, Bonnie Stegman runs that program, and she was a paramedic and a paramedic educator first, and she's also the board member of the Melville Fire Protection District. So I haven't had anything negative said at all about a bachelor's in paramedic, and the only actual direct contact was, again, from Maryville University. It was very positive. And she actually spoke to our capstone class about, and to our students and taught them about different opportunities and things about the career field. So we were very lucky to have her assist us on that.
Awesome. And then one of our last questions that I think we can kind of combine these last two is there a years requirement when transferring into the program? For example, do you need to have had bio within the last 5 years? And then also, do you have a limit on the number of hours a student can transfer in?
Nope. The real limit, there's no timeline. You either know it or you don't. So most of the paramedics who are experienced, they know it, they're working, they're doing it. So no, we don't put a time limit on it. Nursing programs do that more because they have, in my opinion, I could be wrong, because they have so many applicants. It's one way to kind of weed out and get the best. But we don't do that. We are not that big and that popular yet. We're still new. As far as, what was the second part of that question about a year?
The first part was, do you have
credits?
a requirement? And the second one was, do you have a transfer limit for
No, the only transfer limit really is, some places will say up to 90. That's because the degree's 120 and you have to do your last 30 in residence. I'll take all 200 of your credits, but you're still gonna have to do 30 in residence. That's just because you can't, no one wants to have a credit long degree where you take one class at Lindenwood and get a degree. So every university that I'm aware of in the US has that 30 credit hour requirement. But I'll take everything as long as it's from an accredited institution or meets our experiential credit requirements. I'll take it all.
Awesome. And then, so there's a follow-up to that, and you may have just answered it right there, but what if you come in with a bachelor's of science already? If you already have it, then you have to take those 30 hours with you?
Yeah. So some of that can be the pre-reqs you have to finish, because the only Bachelor of Science is there still may be pre-req courses you have to finish. And ours, for our experienced medics, it's very similar to nursing. You kind of do the nursing degree backwards. If you went from associate to a paramedic, you know, if you're associate degree nurse or associate degree paramedic, you really took 400 level courses, and now you're going back and getting 100s and 200s. You know, paramedic's very similar to that. You know, you took your senior courses first. You know.
Awesome. And do you have transfer options from a tech school?
The Lindenwood University has a whole list of what accreditations they accept. As long as they accept those accreditations, we can accept a college credit. And then if they don't accept it, they have also the option to do credit by portfolio and experiential credit. That's why we accept the paramedic license. And the other reason we do the paramedic license by experience only is too many programs have it like paramedic 1, paramedic 2, paramedic 3, or there's so many divisions it's hard to tell. So we say if you got the paramedic license, you get those and you have to take our extra courses to meet the bachelor's requirement. It's just solves a lot of headaches that way.
Awesome. And the last question so far that we have, one just came in, but do you offer the primary paramedic classes online with live labs? Being in a very rural area, this would catch on only if it would be available online.
Well, right now the plan is to offer all the lectures online. So critical care 1 and 2, which I just built, along with Wiley, if you're familiar with Wiley, are asynchronous online. The next ones will be built will be that. I'm not sure when we're deploying that. The lab can't be online, obviously, and the clinical options are there. But, you know, like critical care, you may not get the whole certification from us, but you can take all the lectures online. But like, for example, the CCP exam or the FPC doesn't require any lab whatsoever. I mean, when I did critical care through UMBC, there was no lab whatsoever. We wanted to have that extra. If you want to come in once a week or come in and do clinicals, you can take those. You know, there's no requirement to do the lab for the clinicals right now, but you can at least take the didactic online once we get that running.
Awesome. And then do you have any comments on how to move forward with BS programs at a national level, i.e. NREMT requirements?
Well, that's a great question. There's so many ways to attack it. You know, you can attack it by saying we need to do this and this should be mandatory. You saw the debate and chaos and struggle that caused. And so right now there's only 2 states that require the associate degree. North Carolina, I'm not sure, they were right there requiring the associate degree. Nurses are trying to make BSN a bachelor's degree, but that would just totally shut off their pipeline because they need way more nurses than paramedics. But so I went the other way. I just figure if I build it and everyone likes it and does it, and then more people want to build it, because I think there's great opportunity across the U.S. for different universities to partner with to build this degree. And then they'll reach a point where everybody has a degree and they're like, why aren't we doing this already? Everyone already has it. Right now, you know, the big people who are pushing concerns against the degree are the fire side, who are afraid it'll be harder to train their students and they'll lose their in-house capabilities of training, and the ambulance association, who's afraid it'll be harder to get paramedics and have to pay them more. Well, that's exactly what happened in nursing 30 years ago. In the 80s, they did that. Now, the biggest difference between nursing and paramedic is when nursing went from a diploma model taught in hospitals to a university model, was they got a lot of government resources to pay for that transition that EMS doesn't have. So that might be one way. Look at how nursing did it 30 years ago. Because nursing in the 80s switched from, you know, dormitories in the hospital, diploma, to university models. So you have to look at each state. You know, you have to test the waters in your area. What is your area willing to do that? I mean, the NMSA poll, the Missouri EMS Association poll, what really surprised me was 40% of the paramedics in the state of Missouri, according to this poll that 500 paramedics answered, which is a huge response statewide when you think about it. 500 paramedics responded to this poll. Is that 40% of them already had bachelor degrees. That was one of the crazy findings. So it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen. You know, it's just how slow or fast depends on how we push for it. You know, if you're a member of NAEMT, then you should really tell NAEMT, I want you to go for bachelor degrees. That's important to me as a member. Or you can tell NMC, because NAEMT kind of went neutral on it. Their statement really just said it was neutral. It didn't say yes or no in favor of it. Whereas the flight paramedics and NMC and a couple other groups go, yeah, we need a degree. You know, so advocate for it. You know, get a degree. Make sure that the people that you pay dues to know that you want one. You know, it really comes down to how passionate it is for you. I mean, if I waited for the politics to happen, we'd never have a degree. So I just decided to build one when the opportunity arose. Does that help answer the question? Maybe, you know, that's a complicated answer, but it's a complicated question.
It was just asking for any comments or thoughts that you had on the idea.
Okay.
We did have a comment come in that I just wanted to get out there over the live stream. That the North Carolina date is now June 2023.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Cool.
So it looks like we've addressed everyone's questions and comments so far that have come through, but I will include this contact information in a follow-up email that's going to go out tomorrow morning. And all of this information is going to be available on NEMSI's YouTube page following this presentation as soon as this concludes. And I did send a link in the chat box that will take you to register for CE for those that are in attendance of this live stream. So, do you have anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap up? I really appreciate all this valuable information so far.
No, thank you for having me. I hope I helped. You have my contact information. I'm happy to chat with anyone about anything, anytime, or help anyone get anything they need. So I'm one of you guys. I'm the paramedic, and I'm an educator just like all of you. And I'm happy. I don't like reinventing the wheel. So if I can help you, ask. That's what I'm here for.